Princess stood at the observation window of the Galactic Council station, her silver eyes reflecting the stars beyond. She wore the traditional robes of the Empire, deep purple fabric that shimmered with each movement. Her pale blue skin marked her as royalty among her people, and her posture showed the confidence of someone born to rule. Behind her, the council chamber buzzed with activity as diplomats from dozens of species prepared for the peace negotiations. She sensed the human approaching before she heard his footsteps. His mind was different from others, structured and focused in a way that felt strange to her telepathic senses. When he stopped a respectful distance away, she turned to face him. The human was tall by his species standards, with dark hair and darker eyes. He wore a simple black uniform without decoration, though she could see the outline of weapons hidden beneath his jacket. His face showed no emotion as he bowed slightly. "Princess, I am. The Galactic Council has assigned me as your protection during the negotiations." His expression hardened. She had heard about this insult, a human bodyguard. Her people had walked among the stars for thousands of years before humans even discovered fire. They had built empires and mastered the power of the mind itself while humans still lived in caves. And now the council thought one of them could protect her. "I did not request protection," she said coldly, "especially not from a human." His face remained calm. The council received intelligence about possible assassination attempts during the talks. They believe additional security is necessary. Then they should have sent someone qualified. Turned back to the window, dismissing him. They do not need protection from primitives who just learned to travel between stars a few decades ago. She felt a small ripple of emotion from him. Not anger as she expected, but something closer to patience. It irritated her more than rage would have. "I understand your concerns, Princess. I will do my best to stay out of your way while ensuring your safety." Reached out with her telepathic abilities, probing his mind to see what crude thoughts existed beneath that calm exterior. She expected to find resentment, or perhaps the simple thoughts she associated with younger species. Instead, she encountered something unexpected. His mind was organized like a fortress, each thought deliberate and controlled. He was aware of her probing and had somehow created barriers through sheer mental discipline. She pulled back, disturbed. Humans were not supposed to have that kind of control. They had no telepathic abilities at all. Yet somehow, this had learned to resist her casual scans through nothing but training and willpower. "How long have you been a soldier?" she asked, despite her intention to ignore him. 12 years, Princess. 5 in special operations. And the council thinks this makes you qualified to protect me." They seemed to think so. His tone held no pride or defensiveness, just a simple statement of fact. Over the next 2 days, tried to ignore his presence. He followed at a distance during her meetings with other delegates, never speaking unless spoken to. He checked her quarters each evening before she entered, his movements efficient and thorough. He studied the station's layout, questioned the security teams, and reviewed the list of attendees with an attention to detail that bordered on obsessive. Watched him work despite herself. She noticed how his eyes constantly moved, tracking potential threats, how he positioned himself between her and doorways without making it obvious, how he memorized the faces and patterns of everyone who came near her. It was all very professional and completely unnecessary in her opinion. During a formal dinner on the second evening, she decided to test him. She reached out telepathically to one of the other in attendance, a military advisor named. She asked him to approach her suddenly, as if with urgent news, to see how the human would react. Agreed with amusement. He stood abruptly from his table and walked quickly toward, his face arranged in an expression of concern. Before he had taken 3 steps, moved. He did not draw a weapon or shout an alarm. He simply shifted his position, placing himself at an angle where he could intercept if necessary while keeping his hands free and ready. When delivered his fake urgent message about a schedule change, relaxed but did not return to his previous position. His eyes tracked until the advisor returned to his seat. Felt a strange mixture of annoyance and curiosity. The human's instincts were faster than her telepathy. He had reacted to his movement before she had even sensed the intention to move from his mind. How was that possible? That night she asked him directly, "How did you know to react to his approach at dinner?" Who was checking the security of her quarters glanced at her. His body language changed. He stood too quickly. His hands were empty but tense, and he moved directly toward you rather than signaling for your attention first. It matched the pattern of someone delivering urgent news or a threat. You determined all of that in less than a second. Combat training, princess. You learn to read people quickly or you do not survive long. Sat down on one of the chairs, studying him as he completed his security check. You cannot read thoughts. You have no telepathic abilities at all, yet you notice something I missed. Different tools for different problems. He finished his inspection and moved toward the door. Your telepathy is powerful, but it requires processing time. Sometimes physical cues are faster. Neither is better, just different. Before she could respond, he added, "The peace talks begin tomorrow. The ambassador arrived this evening. I recommend you get rest." After he left, found herself thinking about his words. Different tools for different problems. It was a simple concept, but it challenged something fundamental in her worldview. They had always believed their telepathic abilities made them superior to other species. They could sense lies, understand intentions, and communicate complex ideas instantly. What need did they have for the crude methods of lesser species? But this human, with no telepathy at all, had noticed a threat pattern she had missed. Not because he was better, but because he had trained different skills. Skills born from necessity and survival rather than ancient gifts. She tried to dismiss the thought as she prepared for sleep, but it lingered in her mind like an unwanted question. Perhaps there was more to humans than she had assumed. Perhaps being primitive and being effective were not the same thing. Tomorrow would bring the first session of peace talks with the. She would show the council that she needed no protection, human or otherwise. She was royalty, and she could handle herself. The thought would seem foolish very soon. The explosion came during the diplomatic reception, 3 hours into the peace talks. Was speaking with the ambassador, carefully choosing her words to avoid offense while maintaining her position, when the entire east wing of the station shook. The lights flickered, and somewhere in the distance, alarms began to scream. The reception hall erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted in a dozen languages, some running for the exits while others froze in panic. The ambassador's guards immediately surrounded their charge, weapons drawn. Started to reach out telepathically to sense what was happening, but she never got the chance. Grabbed her arm and pulled her behind a structural pillar before she could protest. His grip was firm but not painful, his movements quick and certain. "Let go of me," demanded, trying to pull free. "I am perfectly capable of handling myself." "Stay down," said, his voice calm but commanding. He drew a pistol from beneath his jacket, his eyes scanning the chaos around them. "Something is wrong." Of course something is wrong. There was an explosion. But running and hiding is beneath my dignity as. 3 contacts, cloaked, moving toward us from the north entrance. His voice cut through her protest. "They are not station security." Went still. She reached out with her telepathy, searching for the minds described. She found nothing. No hostile thoughts, no presence at all in that direction. "You are mistaken. I sense no one there." "They are using cloaking technology. Watch." Followed his gaze. At first, she saw nothing but panicking delegates and confused security personnel. Then she noticed it, a slight shimmer in the air near the entrance, like heat rising from warm stone. It moved with purpose, weaving between the crowd toward their position. Her blood went cold. They had developed cloaking technology that could hide users not just from visual detection, but from telepathic senses as well. She had read reports but had never believed they were true. Now 3 invisible assassins were moving toward her, and her greatest defense was useless against them. "We need to move," said. He holstered his pistol and pulled out a small device from his belt. "When I activate this, run for the service door behind us. Do not stop, do not look back." "What is that?" "Electromagnetic pulse generator. Small radius, but it will disrupt their cloaking for about 10 seconds. He pressed the device into her hand. "If I go down, activate it and run. The door code is 7429. Before she could argue, the shimmer was closer. Much closer. Pressed a button on his device and threw it toward the approaching assassins. A bright flash filled the room, and suddenly 3 warriors were visible, their cloaking fields flickering and failing. They were massive, even for. Each stood over 7 feet tall with gray-scaled skin and multiple arms. They wore combat armor and carried weapons that glowed with deadly energy. The moment their cloaking failed, they charged. Moved to meet them. Expected him to draw his weapon, but instead he grabbed a serving tray from a nearby table and threw it at the lead assassin's face. The blocked it easily, but the distraction let close the distance. He slid under the alien's guard and drove his knife into a joint in the armor at the knee. The roared in pain and swung one of his arms in a wide arc. Rolled away, already moving toward the second assassin. He fought without grace or honor, using every dirty trick had ever heard of and several she had not. He threw chairs, used other people as obstacles, and struck at weak points with brutal efficiency. But he was one human against 3 warriors. They adapted to his tactics, surrounding him and forcing him into a defensive position. One of them broke away from the fight and headed straight for. She gathered her telepathic power and struck at the assassin's mind, trying to overwhelm his thoughts with fear and confusion. But the neural dampening field around his helmet blocked her attack completely. The raised his weapon, and realized with cold certainty that she was about to die. Appeared from the side, slamming into the with his full body weight. It was not enough to knock the massive warrior down, but it threw off his aim. The energy blast that should have killed instead struck the wall behind her, leaving a smoking crater in the metal. The grabbed by the throat with one hand and lifted him off the ground. Watched in horror as struggled, his face turning red from lack of air. But even choking, he did not stop fighting. He pulled something from his belt and jammed it against this armor. A moment later, an explosion of light and sound sent both of them flying backward. Hit the ground hard but rolled to his feet immediately. Could see blood running down his left arm and a massive burn across his shoulder where this weapon had grazed him. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the service door. "Run now." This time did not argue. They ran through the service door and into the maintenance corridors beyond. Behind them, she could hear the remaining assassins pursuing, their heavy footsteps echoing in the metal passages. Led her through a maze of corridors, taking random turns and doubling back several times. His injured arm hung uselessly at his side, but he never slowed down. Finally, he pulled her into a small storage room and sealed the door behind them. "We should be safe here for a few minutes," he said, breathing hard. He slid down the wall to sit on the floor, pressing his good hand against the burn on his shoulder. Knelt beside him, her hands shaking. She had never been in real danger before. The Empire protected its royalty with layers of security and telepathic guards, but here, in this station, her protections had failed. Without, she would be dead. "You are injured," she said, her voice softer than before. "I have had worse." He pulled a medical kit from his belt and began treating his own wounds with practiced efficiency. "We need to reach the evacuation point. Can you contact your ship telepathically from here?" Tried, reaching out with her mind toward the vessel docked at the station, but something was blocking her, an interference she had never felt before. "No, something is jamming telepathic communication." Cursed quietly, one of the first emotional responses she had seen from him. They planned this carefully. The explosion was a distraction. They wanted chaos to cover the assassination attempt. "Why did you protect me?" The question came out before could stop it. "You took that blast for me. You could have died." Looked at her with those dark eyes, and for the first time she saw something other than professional calm. "It is my job. You matter more than I do." "That makes no sense. You do not even know me. We are not even the same species." "Does that matter?" He finished bandaging his arm and slowly stood up. "You are a person who did not deserve to die today. That is enough." Stared at him, completely confused. In culture, warriors fought with honor and skill, but self-preservation was considered wise. Throwing oneself in front of danger to save another was seen as foolish unless that person was family or a bonded partner. Yet this human had done exactly that for someone who had treated him with nothing but contempt. "I do not understand your species," she said quietly. "You do not have to," checked his weapons and moved toward the door. "But right now, we need to work together to survive. Can you do that?" Stood and straightened her robes, trying to regain some of her dignity. "Yes, I can do that." "Good, stay close to me and do exactly as I say. No arguments. I am a princess of the Empire. I do not take orders from—" Another explosion, much closer this time, cut off her protest. The lights in the storage room flickered and died, leaving them in darkness except for the emergency lighting strips along the floor. His voice came from the darkness, calm and steady. "Princess, we can discuss proper protocol after we survive." "Agreed." Took a deep breath and let go of her pride, at least for now. "Agreed." They moved through the damaged station like ghosts, leading with his weapon ready and following close behind. The emergency lights cast strange shadows on the walls, and the sound of distant fighting echoed through the corridors. Twice they hid as patrols passed by, and each time was amazed at how quietly the human could move despite his injuries. After an hour of careful navigation, they reached a junction where the corridor split in 3 directions. Stopped and pulled out a small device, studying the screen with a frown. "The evacuation point is blocked," he said. "They have positioned forces at every major docking bay. They are hunting for someone specific." Me said it was not a question. "Probably." Put the device away and looked at the 3 corridors. "We need to find another way off this station, somewhere they would not expect us to go." Reached out with her telepathy, searching for mines nearby. She could sense the station's remaining population, clusters of fear and confusion scattered throughout the structure. She could feel the cold, focused minds of the warriors as they searched methodically through each section. And she could sense something else, a strange emptiness in one direction that felt wrong. "There," she pointed down the left corridor. "Something is blocking my telepathy in that area. It feels like the dampening fields the assassins used." "Could be their command center," said, "or a trap. Or information about their plans." Surprised herself with her own boldness. A day ago, she would have demanded they find safety immediately. Now she was suggesting they move toward danger. "If we know what they are planning, we might be able to stop it." Studied her for a moment and she thought she saw the hint of a smile. "All right, but we do this carefully. Follow my lead and stay quiet." They moved down the left corridor and noticed how's whole demeanor changed. He became even more cautious, checking each corner twice and moving in short bursts between cover points. She tried to copy his movements, feeling awkward and exposed, but he never rushed her or showed impatience. The dampening effect grew stronger as they approached a secured door. Through a window, could see a communication center filled with equipment. 3 technicians worked at terminals, their backs to the door. On the main screen, she could see a map of the station with various points marked in red. Pulled her back from the window. "Can you sense what they are thinking?" "The dampening field is too strong this close to the source." "Then we need to get inside and access their systems directly." He checked his ammunition and weapons. "When I go in, stay by the door. If anything goes wrong, run. Do not wait for me. What are you going to do? Something stupid, probably. This time he definitely smiled. Ready. Before she could answer, he kicked the door open and rushed inside. The technicians turned in surprise, reaching for weapons, but was already moving. He shot the first one before it could raise its gun, then threw a small device at the second. The device attached to this armor and released an electrical charge that sent the warrior convulsing to the ground. The third technician was faster. It got its weapon up and fired, the energy blast hitting in the side. He grunted in pain but did not fall. Instead, he closed the distance and engaged in hand-to-hand combat, using the confined space to his advantage. The fight was brutal and quick, ending when managed to get behind thee and apply what looked like a choking technique until the warrior went limp. Rushed to his side as he slumped against a terminal, breathing hard. The burn on his side looked serious, and he was losing blood from somewhere she could not see. I am fine, he said before she could ask. Check the main terminal. We need to know what they are planning. Moved to the terminal and began reading the data. Her hands shook as she processed what she was seeing. This is worse than we thought. The assassination attempt was just the beginning. They have planted explosives throughout the station. They plan to destroy it completely within the next 2 hours. Why? Pulled himself up to look at the data. Killing the delegates would be enough to disrupt the peace talks. Because humans are here, pointed to a file on the screen. They see humanity as a threat. You are a young species with no significant territory or power, but you are making alliances with older species like mine. If the peace talks succeed, humanity gains legitimacy and protection. They cannot allow that. Was quiet for a moment. So they kill everyone and blame it on equipment failure or sabotage. The peace talks collapse, the alliances never form, and humanity remains isolated and vulnerable. Yes, continued reading, but there is something else. They have a team moving toward the reactor core. If they succeed in destabilizing it, the explosion will destroy not just the station but any ships in the docking area. No one will escape. Can we stop them? We would need to reach the reactor core and override the destabilization sequence manually, but there are at least 20 warriors between us and that location. Turned to look at him. Even you cannot fight that many. Stood up slowly, using the terminal for support. His face was pale from blood loss, but his expression was determined. Do you know how to override the sequence? I can learn. They have excellent technical training. Then we go to the reactor core. He checked his remaining weapons. Not because we can win, but because we have to try. Felt something strange in her chest, an emotion she could not quite name. This human, injured and outnumbered, was choosing to fight an impossible battle not for glory or honor, but simply because it was the right thing to do. It was the most foolish and most noble thing she had ever witnessed. Why? She asked. Why would you throw away your life for a station full of people who see your species as primitive and unimportant? Looked at her with those steady dark eyes. Because if we do nothing, they die. That matters more than what they think of us. That is what being human means. We do not have telepathy or ancient wisdom or powerful technology. What we have is the stubborn refusal to give up, even when we should. He moved toward the door, then stopped and looked back at her. You do not have to come. You could hide here until rescue arrives. No one would blame you. Thought about her people, proud and ancient, who believed themselves superior to younger species. She thought about her own prejudices, her dismissive treatment of this human who had saved her life multiple times. And she thought about what she wanted to be, not what tradition expected her to be. She walked to his side. I am coming with you. We do this together. It will be dangerous. I know. She reached out telepathically, gently touching his mind. This time he did not resist, and she felt the depth of his determination and the pain he was hiding. But I am tired of being protected. If you can fight while injured, I can fight while scared. Nodded, and she saw respect in his expression. All right, then let us go save a station full of people who do not know they need saving. They gathered weapons from the fallen and studied the map, planning their route to the reactor core. It would require them to pass through heavily patrolled areas, avoid detection, and fight when necessary. The chances of success were minimal at best. But as they left the communication center and headed deeper into the station, felt something she had not experienced in her sheltered royal life. She felt alive, not because of comfort or safety, but because she had chosen to stand beside someone brave and fight for something that mattered. She glanced at as they moved through the shadows. He was bleeding, exhausted, and facing impossible odds, but he never hesitated, never complained, never considered surrender. Maybe humans were primitive by standards. Maybe they lacked the gifts and wisdom of ancient species. But watching lead them towards certain danger with nothing but determination and a stubborn refusal to quit, realized that humans possessed something her people had lost over thousands of years of superiority. They possessed the raw, fierce will to fight for what was right, no matter the cost. And in that moment, she was proud to fight beside one. The journey to the reactor core took them through the darkest parts of the station. Emergency power had failed in several sections, leaving only the dim glow of backup systems to light their way. Moved slower now, his injuries catching up to him, but he refused to stop or rest. They encountered their first patrol in a cargo bay filled with shipping containers. 5 warriors were searching the area methodically, checking each container, pulled behind a stack of crates and put a finger to his lips. Reached out telepathically, touching the minds of the. She could not control them directly through their neural dampening, but she could sense their intentions and positions. She whispered the information to, who used it to guide them through the bay, always staying one step ahead of the searchers. They almost made it through when one of the containers they passed suddenly shifted, making a loud metallic screech. Every head turned toward the sound, cursed and pushed toward the exit while he opened fire on the closest warriors. 2 went down before they could react. The others returned fire, energy blasts turning the cargo bay into a deadly light show. Pressed herself against the wall, watching in horror as fought against impossible odds. He used the containers as cover, firing from different positions to make them think there were multiple attackers. One of them figured out the trick and charged towards position, made a split-second decision. She stepped out from cover and focused all her telepathic power on the charging warrior, hitting him with a wave of disorientation and sensory confusion. The stumbled, his aim going wild, and took advantage of the opening to eliminate him. The remaining 2 warriors turned toward. She tried to hit them with another telepathic attack, but her power was weaker now, exhausted from the effort. They raised their weapons, and she knew she could not dodge in time. Appeared between them, firing both of his guns simultaneously. One fell, but the other's shot caught square in the chest. His armor absorbed most of the impact, but the force threw him backward. He hit the ground hard and did not get up immediately. Rushed to his side as he struggled to breathe. The chest armor had saved his life, but she could see the burn beneath the broken plates. "We need to stop. You need medical attention." No time. Pulled himself to his feet, using her shoulder for support. How much further to the reactor? 10 minutes if we can avoid more patrols. She looked at his injuries with growing concern. But you can barely walk. Then you will have to be my eyes and ears. Use your telepathy to guide us around anymore. He took a step forward and nearly fell. Caught him and wrapped his arm around her shoulders, taking some of his weight. They moved together through the remaining corridors, supporting while scanning ahead with her mind. She directed them around 3 more patrols and through sections that were temporarily clear. It was slow and difficult, but they made progress. Finally, they reached the entrance to the reactor core. The massive door was sealed but had prepared for this. He pulled out a small cutting device and began working on the lock mechanism. His hands shook from exhaustion and blood loss, but he did not stop. The door opened with a hiss of pressurized air. Beyond lay the reactor chamber, a vast space filled with machinery and pulsing energy. In the center, standing before the main reactor controls, was a massive wearing ornate armor that marked him as a commander. He was surrounded by 4 elite guards and was working at the control panel. The commander turned as they entered, his multiple eyes focusing on them with what might have been amusement. "The princess and her human pet. You have done well to come this far, but you are too late. The destabilization sequence has already begun." Raised his weapon, but one of the guards shot it out of his hand before he could fire. The energy blast burned his fingers and heard him grunt in pain. "The peace talks threatened our expansion plans," the commander continued, his voice deep and resonant. "But your arrival here has given us an even greater opportunity. When this station explodes, the evidence will point to human sabotage. Your species will be declared hostile, isolated by the very allies you sought. They will offer protection to species threatened by human aggression, and our influence will grow." Clever said through gritted teeth, "But we are not dead yet." "No, but you will be very soon." The commander gestured to his guards. "Kill them both. Make it look like they died trying to stop the reactor failure. It will add authenticity to our story." The guards advanced with weapons raised, gathered what remained of her telepathic strength, preparing for one final attack, but grabbed her arm and pulled her close. "When I move, hit the commander with everything you have," he whispered. "Do not hold back." "What are you going to do?" "Something really stupid." He pulled several small devices from his belt, the last of his explosives. "Trust me." The guards were 10 feet away when threw the explosives, not at the guards but at the power conduits running along the walls. The explosions ripped through the conduits, sending arcing electricity across the chamber. The electromagnetic pulse disrupted the guards' dampening fields for a moment, and in that moment struck. She hit the commander with the full force of her telepathic power, everything she had left. It was not enough to control him, but it was enough to break his concentration and fill his mind with confusion and pain. He stumbled away from the reactor controls, roaring in rage. Charged forward despite his injuries. The nearest guard tried to stop him, but used a brutal close combat technique that broke the warrior's arm and sent him crashing into the machinery. The second guard grabbed from behind, lifting him off the ground. Saw the third guard aiming his weapon at its head. She did not think, did not hesitate. She ran forward and threw herself between them, just as had done for her earlier. The energy blast hit her in the shoulder, spinning her around and sending her crashing to the floor. The pain was overwhelming, worse than anything she had ever felt. But through the haze of agony, she heard roar with rage. He broke free from the guard holding him and fought with a ferocity she had not seen before. He was not trying to survive anymore. He was trying to destroy everything in his path. The chamber erupted into chaos. Guards fell under his assault, their superior size and strength no match for his desperation and fury. The commander, recovered from his attack, drew his own weapon and faced directly. They fought in the shadow of the reactor, human, and while lay bleeding on the floor. She tried to help, reaching out with her telepathy, but her strength was gone. She could only watch as fought the massive commander with nothing but a knife and determination. The commander was bigger, stronger, and less injured. He caught his knife arm and twisted, breaking bones, cried out in pain but used his other hand to pull something from his belt, a small pistol, his backup weapon. He pressed it against the commander's throat and fired 3 times. The commander fell, his armor no protection at point-blank range. Stood over him for a moment, breathing hard, then turned too. He dropped to his knees beside her, his face pale and covered in blood. "Stay with me," he said, pressing his hands against her wound to stop the bleeding. "You are going to be fine." "The reactor," she managed to say through the pain. "You have to stop it." "Not without you." He pulled out a medical kit and began treating her injury with shaking hands. If that reactor explodes, thousands will die. You have to stop it, now." He looked at her, and she saw the conflict in his eyes, the choice between saving her and saving everyone else. She reached up with her good hand and touched his face. "Go," she whispered. "I will be fine. Do what you came here to do." For a moment she thought he would refuse. Then he nodded and stood up, moving to the reactor controls. Watched him work, his broken arm hanging uselessly at his side, his movements growing slower as blood loss caught up to him. But he did not stop. The reactor's alarms began to quiet. The pulsing energy steadied. And finally, with one last input, shut down the destabilization sequence completely. He turned back to a tired smile on his face. "We did it." Then his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed to the floor beside her. Tried to reach him, but her body would not move. She lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of approaching footsteps. Help had arrived, too late to fight but in time to save them. As consciousness faded, her last thought was that she finally understood what made humans special. It was not their technology or their strength. It was their willingness to sacrifice everything for others, even when those others had treated them with nothing but contempt. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing she had ever witnessed, woke to the soft glow of medical technology surrounding her. The healing chamber hummed quietly, its energy working to repair her damaged shoulder. She could feel her body mending, the pain reduced to a dull ache. Through the transparent walls of the chamber, she could see the medical bay of her people's royal ship. A doctor noticed she was awake and approached the chamber. "Princess, please remain still. The healing process is nearly complete. You were fortunate. A few more minutes without treatment and the damage would have been permanent." "How long have I been unconscious?" Her voice was weak but functional. 3 days. We brought you directly from the station once the threat was neutralized." The doctor checked the chamber's readings. "You lost a significant amount of blood, but you will make a full recovery." "And the human who was with me?" The doctor's expression became neutral. "The human survived as well. He is in the station's medical facility. His injuries were extensive, but humans have remarkable healing capabilities. The medical staff believes he will recover, though it will take time." Closed her eyes, relief washing over her. They had both survived. Against all odds, they had stopped the plot and lived to tell about it. "I want to see him." "That may be difficult, Princess. He is not aboard this vessel, and your father has requested that you return home immediately once you are released from the healing chamber. There are matters of state that require your attention." "Then those matters will wait." His voice carried the authority of royalty, even weakened by injury. "Arrange transportation for me to the station's medical facility. That is not a request." The doctor bowed and left to make arrangements. 2 hours later, was released from the healing chamber. Her shoulder was still tender, but the wound had closed and her strength was returning. She dressed in simple robes rather than her formal attire and took a shuttle to the station. The station was different now. Repair crews worked throughout the damaged sections, and security had been increased dramatically. The Dominion had issued a formal apology, claiming the attack was the work of extremists acting without government approval. No one believed this completely, but it allowed diplomatic relations to continue without immediate war. Found in a small room in the medical wing. He was sitting up in bed, his chest and arm wrapped in bandages, a medical monitor attached to his finger. He looked tired and pale but alive. When he saw her enter, he tried to stand. "Stay seated," said quickly. "You have earned the right to rest." "Princess," he settled back onto the bed, "I am glad you are recovering." "Thanks to you." She pulled a chair to his bedside and sat down. "The doctors tell me you should not have survived your injuries. You lost too much blood and sustained too much damage. Yet here you are." "Humans are stubborn about dying," he smiled slightly. "It is one of our few talents." They sat in silence for a moment, two people who had faced death together and somehow survived. finally spoke. "I came to apologize. When we first met, I treated you with contempt and disrespect. I judged your species as primitive and you as unworthy. I was wrong about everything." "You do not need to apologize, Princess." "Yes, I do." She looked at him directly. "You saved my life multiple times. You fought impossible battles and sacrificed your own safety for mine, and I gave you nothing but coldness in return. That is not acceptable behavior, regardless of rank or species." Was quiet for a moment. "You fought beside me in the end. You took an energy blast meant for me. I would say we are even. That was one moment of bravery compared to your continuous courage. It does not balance." Paused, gathering her thoughts. "My people pride themselves on being superior to younger species. We believe our telepathy and ancient knowledge make us better, but you showed me something my people have forgotten." "What is that?" "The value of humility, the strength in admitting you need help, the courage to fight even when victory seems impossible." She leaned forward slightly. "Humans have been traveling the stars for only a few decades, but you have already proven yourselves as valuable allies and formidable warriors, not through technology or telepathy, but through sheer determination and heart." "We just do what needs to be done," adjusted his position, wincing slightly. "Giving up is not in our nature." "I have noticed," smiled, a genuine expression of warmth. "Which is why I have a request. When you are recovered, I would like you to remain as my advisor and protector. Not because I need protection, but because I want to learn more about humans and your way of thinking. Your perspective is valuable, and I believe my people could benefit from it." Look surprised. "You want me to stay as your bodyguard?" "More than that. I want you as a partner in building understanding between our species." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. The attack revealed something important. Humanity is becoming a factor in galactic politics, whether other species like it or not. Your courage, adaptability, and refusal to surrender make you natural allies for species like mine, but prejudice and fear could prevent those alliances from forming. She turned back to him. "I want to be the bridge that connects our peoples, and I cannot do that without someone who understands both sides, someone who has proven themselves in the worst possible circumstances, someone I trust." Considered her words carefully. "That is a significant responsibility and a considerable change from my current duties." "I know, and I will understand if you refuse. You have already done more than anyone could ask," returned to the chair. "But I hope you will accept, not just for the political benefits, but because I have come to respect you. Perhaps even consider you a friend if such a thing is possible between our species." "It is possible," extended his good hand to her. "I accept your offer, Princess, though I warn you I am not trained in diplomacy or politics. I am just a soldier." Took his hand, careful of his injuries. "You are much more than just a soldier. You are proof that greatness comes in many forms and that courage is not exclusive to any one species. That is the message I want to share with the galaxy." Over the following weeks, as both recovered from their injuries, they worked together to prepare a proposal for the Galactic Council. Wanted to establish a formal alliance between the Empire and Earth, creating a framework for cooperation and mutual defense. It was an ambitious plan, one that would face resistance from conservative elements in both governments. But the story of what happened on the station had spread throughout the galaxy. The princess who fought beside her human protector, the human soldier who stood against impossible odds to save thousands of lives. It became a symbol of what different species could achieve when they worked together. 3 months after the attack, stood before the Galactic Council, fully recovered and dressed in formal robes. Stood beside her in a new uniform, representing Earth's diplomatic corps. Together, they presented their proposal for alliance and cooperation. The vote was not unanimous, but it passed. The Empire and Earth would form the first formal alliance between an ancient species and humanity. It would serve as a template for other agreements, opening doors that had been closed to humans since they first ventured into space. After the vote, and stood on an observation deck, watching ships from a dozen species depart the station. The future was uncertain but filled with possibility. "Do you ever think about that day in the reactor chamber?" asked, "when we thought we were going to die?" "Sometimes," looked thoughtful. "I remember thinking that if I had to die, at least it would be for something that mattered, saving lives, protecting others. That felt right." "We did not die, though. We survived and changed the course of history." She smiled at him. "Your people have a saying, I believe, 'Fortune favors the bold.'" "Something like that," he smiled back. "Though I think in this case, fortune favored the stubborn and slightly crazy." Laughed, a sound that still surprised her with its genuine joy. A few months ago, she would never have laughed with a human, never have considered one worthy of her time or respect. Now she could not imagine facing the challenges ahead without by her side. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to." "You are welcome, though to be fair, you did eventually stop being difficult and started being useful." His tone was teasing, something she had learned to recognize as human humor. "I was never difficult. I was appropriately cautious and properly dignified." "Is that what we are calling it?" They continued their friendly argument as they walked through the station, two very different beings who had found common ground in the most unlikely circumstances. Behind them, the formal alliances were being documented and celebrated. Ahead of them lay the work of building true understanding between species. But in that moment, standing together as friends and partners, they had already achieved something more important than any treaty or agreement. They had proven that differences in species, culture, and biology were not barriers to respect and cooperation. They were simply challenges to overcome with patience, courage, and willingness to learn. And if a human soldier and an alien princess could bridge that gap, then perhaps there was hope for the galaxy after all.